Chapter 397, The Battlefield of Primitive World. This chapter is updated by Novels.pl. Martial techniques were divided into 4 realms. They were beginner level, small success, succeed, and the perfection of martial arts. Previously, the sword techniques the genius students had demonstrated were in succeed level. Whether they demonstrated 3 moves or more, none reached the perfection of martial arts. In reality, few people were able to polish a set of sword techniques to the perfection of martial arts. Only those warriors who spent decades cultivating a particular set of sword techniques were capable of such feat. But who would spend so much time polishing one set of sword techniques? With that much time, they could have practiced a more superior level of sword technique instead. Of course, if one could polish a sword technique until the perfection of martial arts, the sword technique would undergo great changes. Its power would grow greatly, its exquisiteness clearer, the technique would rise to a new level. Take the 13 sword techniques of soul chasing as an example. It was originally a peak sword technique of the superior class of the spiritual stage, but its power would be stronger than certain sword techniques in the inferior class of the ghost level once it was polished to the perfection of martial arts. Soul-breaking wind whisper. Zhang Yuochen very slowly began demonstrating the second move of the sword technique. He moved even slower than he did for the first move. What is Zhang Yuochen doing? Can he do it or not? Huang Yanjun glared with her almond eyes, angered. She felt that he wasn't taking the demonstration seriously and was playing around. She failed to see the profoundness of his sword technique even with her cultivation. Some of the students began to feel drowsy watching Zhang Yuochen. Soul repose shadowing. Continuing to move at an incredibly slow speed, Zhang Yuochen finally completed his demonstration of the third move of the sword technique. He then stopped and didn't continue to practice. Why did he stop? Did he only finish learning 3 moves? From below came a lot of questioning sounds. He only managed to execute 3 moves of the so-called heart integrated into sword, and so slowly at that. He really doesn't live to his name. Looks like he simply lucked out in receiving Buddhist emperor's inheritance and reached heart integrated into sword. The envious students were being sarcastic on purpose. They were implying that Zhang Yuochen was merely luckier than them. If they were the one receiving Buddhist emperor's inheritance, they would also achieve the same things that he did. It was true that Zhang Yuochen had only practiced these 3 moves to the perfection of martial arts. The rests were all in the succeed. Since he hadn't practiced them to the realm of perfection, there was no need to demonstrate them. In just 3 short days, he's able to practice the sword technique to the perfection of martial arts. This child is indeed in the realm of heart integrated into sword. Demi Saint Linian praised. Demi Saint Lingxiu nodded. It's even more incredible for him to have perfected 3 moves than polishing the entire set to the succeed. He's more genius than I am. Zhang Yuochen had undoubtedly gained the first place in the second round of the examination. The round continued. The students who were done demonstrating their sword technique left the Saint Academy in succession and returned to the courier station of Martial Market. There, they waited for the results of the second round and the details of the third round at the same time. Six Sinkong, Shang Kiki, Liu Shuaihan, and Chen Xie had also finished the second round of the examination, so they gathered and went to the biggest restaurant in the 7th district, the Saint Music Pavilion, and had a celebratory feast. The Saint Music Pavilion was extremely expensive. Only half-saint families and disciples of powerful saint families could dine at such an extravagant restaurant. Chen Xie called herself the host, and so she was buying. At the celebratory feast, Liu Shuaihan revealed some information to everyone. The third round may be different than usual. It's likely it won't be held in the Saint Academy or even in Kunlun's field. Since the forefather of Saint Liu Gentry was Saint Liu Xu, Liu Shuaihan's information was certainly not baseless. Chang Kiki had sobered a little and quickly asked, if not in Kunlun's field, where would it be? Liu Shuaihan pressed her lips together into a slight smile but said nothing. The battlefield of primitive world, Zhang Yuochen said, wearing a thoughtful expression. Everyone's expression changed. No way. The battlefield of primitive world is so dangerous that only monks of the fish dragon realm and the existence of half-saint class stand a chance there. If warriors of the heaven realm go, they're no different than cannon fodder. Huang Yanchen said solemnly. I've heard only some of the news the forefather sent. Right now, the high level of the Saint Academy hadn't made a decision if they'll send us there. It's never a bad thing to prepare ahead of time, Luo Shuaihan said. Everyone nodded in response. They went to purchase healing pills, genuine martial arms, and amulets after the feast, preparing a large number of resources and treasures. Since they were heading into the battlefield of primitive world, naturally they had to be completely armed to the teeth. In the Saint Academy, in a deep and serene abode of fairies and immortals. This abode was very close to the holy meridian of the Saint Academy, and the spiritual chi here was relatively thick. There seemed to be spiritual chi spreading out from the surface of the rock face. Tap, tap. Crisp footsteps rang out in the abode. Xihai approached the bottom of the abode and knelt on one knee, bending his body in a bow. Forefather, in the second round of the examination, Zhang Yuochen actually practiced the sword technique until the perfection of martial arts. This child not only has outstanding talent but has a terrifying comprehension ability. Coupled with the fact that he has refined the Golden Dragon's Dragon Pearl, it's unfathomable what more he'll achieve in the future. If we don't kill him now, he'll certainly spell disaster for us in the future. Demi Saint Sandao was seated cross-legged above him on a stone chair, casting a giant human-shaped shadow and emitting a terrifying power. He sneered coldly. Being Lei Jing's disciple, he has always been an enemy to the Saint Xu gentry. Today, at the stairway to heaven, he made us lose all our face. If we don't kill him, we'll become the laughingstock of the world. Back then, Lei Jing had offended Saint Xu gentry. That was why he had been forced to leave the Saint Academy and leave for the Omen Ridge. Now, Lei Jing had brought a group of genius students back to the Saint Academy. Naturally, the Saint Xu gentry felt the threat and thought of Lei Jing's students as imaginary enemies. Since that's the case, I'll go make the arrangements now. Let's take the opportunity to get rid of him before he fully develops, Xu Hai said. Wait. Demi Saint Sandao stopped Xihai. Today, Zhang Yuochen's performance was too spectacular. There were those at the level of the headmaster who had begun paying attention to him and preparing to take him as a disciple. If we kill him right in the East Region Saint City, how can we prevent the headmaster from finding out? Then what's your plan? Xihai was confused. Demi Saint Sandao slowly said, the location for the third round of the examination has almost been confirmed. We'll be sending all of the participating students to the battlefield of Primitive World. What? The battlefield of Primitive World? Xihai was greatly surprised. Demi Saint Sandao smiled. Why are you so astonished? The battlefield of Primitive World is also split into different levels. They'll only be sent to the inferior Primitive World. Though it's still dangerous, it shouldn't be difficult for someone at the Heaven Realm to survive. Do you know which inferior primitive world? Xihai asked. The Five Elements Primitive World. It's a newly discovered primitive world. Go seek out a few reliable aces below the Fish Dragon Realm and bring them to me. I'll contact some of the people in the battlefield of Primitive World and have them sent to the Five Elements Primitive World ahead of time. When Zhang Yuochen goes here to participate in the third round of the examination, they'll be able to get rid of him without anyone none the wiser, Demi Saint Sandao said. Xihai was ecstatic. You're very wise to come up with such a marvelous plan. In the Saint Academy, there's a saint who is loyal to the Saint Xu gentry called Ni Wenlong. He's a master on the Heaven Board. If he strikes, he'll definitely be able to kill Zhang Yuochen. A master of the Heaven Board? Good. Very good. Anyone below the Fish Dragon Realm is already considered a top master. Furthermore, even if he's discovered by a saint from the Saint Academy, he can explain that it's a training experience of the Heaven Board. Demi Saint Sandao laughed. Go now and bring Li Wenlong here. Xihai, work hard for me. As long as you can get rid of Zhang Yuochen this time, I'll gift you a sword heart pill and help you break into the realm of heart integrated into sword. Many thanks, ancestor. Xihai felt overjoyed. He quickly bowed and backed out of the abode to find Ni Wenlong. The sky was already dark when they got back to the courier station of Martial Market. Seek Singkong and Chang Kiki returned to their own rooms to continue refining their dragon's blood. Zhang Yuochen stood alone in the garden. Threads of bright moonlight were like strands of silver gauze spilling onto his body, casting a long shadow. Flash. He rubbed the storage ring with his finger and saw a flash of light. He retrieved a long purple sword and gripped it in his hand. The blade of the sword was slightly cold. It was about 1 1/3 meters long and about half a palm wide. The mark of an ancient mythical beast was carved on the surface of the blade. It seemed to resemble a thunder vulture. It was the Violet Thunder Sword, a 10th level genuine martial arms. There were 72 basic inscriptions and 3 medium level inscriptions carved on the blade. The basic inscriptions were all electric inscriptions. Of the 3 lines of medium level inscriptions, 1 was of the inscription of electric series, 1 was of the inscription of power series, and 1 was of the inscription of fire series. Zhang Yuochen had just purchased the sword at the Martial Market in the 7th district, costing him 370,000 spiritual crystals. He temporarily placed his Abyss Ancient Sword in the Sword Sanctum. He estimated that it wouldn't be restored for a while. If the 3rd round of the examination was really in the battlefield of Primitive World, he naturally needed a suitably powerful combat sword. Though he had already reached the realm of heart integrated into sword and he could use just about anything as a sword, he would definitely be able to exhibit more combat power with a true legendary sword in hand. A 10th level genuine martial arms was indeed much more expensive than a 9th level genuine martial arms. 370,000 spiritual crystals. It was certainly an enormous fortune for an ordinary warrior of the Heaven Realm. Swoosh. He held the hilt and swung the sword gently without running his genuine chi. The sword immediately crackled with the sound of lightning. Strands of fine electricity surged out from the blade of the sword, completely enveloping his right arm. Good sword. Zhang Yuochen moved all of the genuine chi in his body and sank it into the meridians of his right hand, directing them toward his sword. He instantly activated all 72 lines of electric inscriptions carved on it. Boom! The sound of thunder and beasts roaring burst forth from the blade. He then saw streaks of purple lightning shooting out of the sword tip, forming dozens of lightning as thick as a wine cup. They flew in all directions, nearly enveloping the entire garden in lightning. It was completely impossible to see any of his shadows.